here this morning to share with you our subject is finding your voice. And as a father, I want to help my children and grandchildren find their voice. So I'd like to impart that with you today. You know, it's something that the reason why I do these shows is really to impart what God has imparted to me. And since He's given me a father's heart, I want to share a father's heart with you, and in different ways, in many different aspects. So it's always our mission is to bring the hearts of the fathers to the children and children to the fathers. So I have 3 stories to share with you this morning. And each story has the intent behind it of expressing finding your voice and encouraging other people to find your voice once you've found yours. And so first I want to say everyone has a story to tell. Everyone has a voice. What is your voice? Who is your audience? How do you find the answers to these questions? If you find your voice, you'll find your calling. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find your destiny. Now, a voice is not necessarily just an audible, in the way in which I'm using it isn't just sounds coming out of your mouth as audibly. Sometimes your voice is, an artist can be painting, and that's their voice. A musician can be singing music, and that's their voice. And also naturally speech and another way of finding your voice. But it's the deeper meaning behind that. So in every one of our shows, I always think it's important that I describe and define what I mean by voice. So I always go back to the definition. The first meaning is the one you would naturally think would be true. The sound voice, it means the sound produced in a person's larynx and uttered through the mouth as speech or song. That's the common uses of the word voice. But there's a second meaning for it, and that's the one I'd really like to focus on today. And that means a particular opinion or attitude expressed. It could be a point of view. It's something that you believe in. If you use the word express in terms of a voice, in terms of using it as a verb, you would say, get teachers to voice their opinions on important subjects. In other words, it's to express something, particularly in words, because we talked about before how important words are. So how do you find your voice? What is your voice? And really the steps to doing this is finding out who you are. Because on the foundation of finding who you are, on the pathway to finding your voice, you first have to find out who you are. So you may find yourself expressing yourself as a voice crying in the wilderness. This is another thought that came into my mind. There's a Dartmouth College, Dartmouth University, I guess it's called, has a motto. And the motto in Latin is Vox Clamantis in Deserto. And deserto doesn't mean dessert like what you have after your dinner. It actually means a voice crying out in the wilderness. So deserto is wilderness. Let me say it again. Vox Clamantis in Deserto. A voice crying out in the wilderness. You may find your voice is that way. It may seem to you to be that way, but that's okay, because each person is created individually, and everyone has a voice. And not to be ashamed of it, not to be to avoid it. You don't have to have somebody else's voice. Have your own. So I'm going to talk about 2 instances where Papa Tom is finding his voice. And in finding his voice, sometimes I run across crossways with big data or these private institutions that'll censor me. I've had 2 instances where it comes out to be the case, and I find it very interesting that our founding fathers, they thought finding a voice was so important that they made the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights was the freedom of speech. And yet in the war of words that we're having today, the first thing that evil people who want to shut us down and to stop us from being free, the first thing they want to shut down is to shut down us talking, shut down our voice from being expressed. And I've had that actually happen to me twice. I'll share that in a minute. Before I share that, let me say what the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights is. There are 5 freedoms in the First Amendment. The 5 freedoms that the First Amendment protects, and our founding fathers wanted us to have. Number 1, freedom of speech. Number 2, freedom of religion. Number 3, freedom of the press. Number 4, freedom of assembly. And number 5, the right to petition the government. Think January 6th, for example. Together, these 5 guaranteed freedoms make the people of the United States of America the freest people in the world. So currently, private companies like Facebook and used to be Twitter until Elon Musk took them over, and YouTube, they want to censor what we have. In today's world, if you mention something on the issues of delivering medical disinformation, the two issues that I went crossways with in some of my shows and podcasts, because every one of our shows is put out on Charisma Podcast Network as a podcast. One was I was interviewing Dinesh D'Souza, and it was about the spiritual roots of what was happening in America, and it had to do with his movie 2,000 Mules, which has to do with election fraud. So immediately they catch that, and I'm reprimanded by these institutions. I think it was Facebook in that time. And they wanted to shut me down because they don't like Dinesh D'Souza. So he goes off on locals, and there's other ways that you could find his information through different platforms like Rumble and these other institutions. But it's sad to me that private companies are working in cahoots with the deep state and the government to shut down the freedom of speech and censoring people. So the second one was actually, I did a humorous skit, a parody, 2 weeks before Halloween. It was called The Dark Side of Halloween. And I mentioned a thing, the thing you put in your arm. Can't mention what it is because the search engines will probably knock me off if I mention it. It's a thing you put in your arm. Search engines picked it up, and they sent me a letter. I said, YouTube put me down for a week and said I was spreading medical misinformation. Now, this show has nothing to do with those things. This show is a relationship show. It has to do with a father's heart. It has to do with connecting with people, and as a father would connect with his children and grandchildren. And that's what the show is about. All those subjects are mentioned, and if you go crossways with medical disinformation or what they consider to be medical disinformation, or you go crossways with election fraud, mention subjects of those on those lines, it often comes up in the search engines, and they want to shut down the show. It is sad to me in America today that we have institutions. Now, they're private, but they're working hand in glove with the government to do this to us. Second thing I want to bring up is what in finding your voice, I've listened to a number of people, and their voices have affected me. So I'm reaching out to a certain number of people. I'm going to share with you their names. I'm going to tell you why I'm doing it. These are people whose voice has spoken to me, and they have content and truth in what they're saying, and that's why I want to get them on the show. So the first person, number one person I'd love to get on the Father's Heart Talk Show is Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you ever heard him, but he's a psychologist. He's getting railroaded right now up in Canada by the institution he belongs to. They want to take his license away unless he's retrained. Well, I would just share with you, whenever you can get a hold of what Jordan Peterson is speaking, get a hold of it and listen to it, because it's right on. It really speaks to me in so many different ways and so many different subjects. I mean, the guy is brilliant to begin with, and he has an incredible articulation and his craft of speaking. He really understands his craft, and his speaking is excellent. Second one did commit to come onto the show was General Jerry Boykin. He wrote the book, Never Surrender. By the way, a lot of the people I'm going to bring on the show are authors for some reason. I don't know what that is, but it has something to do with their voice, I'm sure, is they have things to say. And General Jerry Boykin was the founder of Delta Force. He's a real man's man. He's a warrior of warriors. He reminds me of General Patton, the way he comes across. And he's going to speak about the military, and he's going to speak about God and country. He's going to speak. He wore his uniform one time to church, and in the uniform he began to discuss with the congregation things he found out about God and Allah in one of his places, either it was Iraq, Afghanistan, or any one of the theaters that he fought in. And a New York Times journalist got a hold of what he spoke, and they tried to railroad him out of the military. Well, I actually met the Judge Advocate General, Joe Schmidt, who actually helped him get out of that pickle that he was in. But he shouldn't have been in that pickle to begin with. Anyway, he's a great guy. I'm sure you'll enjoy him. These people speak with voices, and there's power behind their voices because of the truth that they relate. The third one is Kirk Cameron. I've watched some of his movies. Again, he's a Christian man, and he writes movies, produces movies on family. I'm not sure if you are familiar with Fathom Events, but there's Kendrick Brothers down in Atlanta, Georgia, that puts some very good movies out. Might have them on too. But Kirk Cameron is speaking of the family and what's happening in the schools to our children. His focus is on the children. By the way, as I mentioned the word children, I want to mention that when I do a review of my podcasts through Charisma Podcast Network, there's 5 subjects that always seem to ring the bells. 1 is talking about fathers. 2 is talking about family. 3 is talking about children. 4 is talking about freedom. I can't remember what the 5th one is, but those subjects are dear to people's hearts. And this show will be ringing with themes on those subjects. The next person is Kevin Sorbo. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the name. Kevin Sorbo is actually one of the most handsome men I've ever met. He's a movie star quality, and that's because he is a movie star. But he got knocked out of Hollywood because of his beliefs, conservative beliefs. Again, he's a Christian, and he has conservative beliefs. He played Hercules at one point in one of the shows, and he's putting independent films together on the same subjects that I'm talking about. And when I listen to Kevin Sorbo speak, I'm really attracted to him, the words he's saying. The next one is Denzel Washington, and that's a long shot, but I have emails sent out to these people's agents to inquire as to see will they come on the Father Talk Show. If any of the people in the audience know these people in some way or have a connection to them, I'd love to have them on the show because I want them to express their voice, because their voice has affected me in a positive way, and I want it to affect you because you're my audience family. The next person is Ted Decker. He wrote the book, again, another author, called The Forgotten Way. And it has to do with the process of thinking outside what you'd normally learn in church, outside the traditions of men, which is a pet peeve of mine of churches, by the way. And he talks about going back to what it was like to walk in the shoes of someone as an early believer, following the way, the truth, and the light. So Ted Decker, another person who's very impacted my life and the things that I've read, and I love his voice. This is another one outside of the normal 9 dots, but it's something that affected me. Phil Driscoll. Have another thing, email out to his agent. Phil Driscoll is probably the best trumpet player in the world. Well, he was at one time. Both secular and Christian, doesn't matter. He does happen to be a Christian. But what I want him to talk about is the intrinsic value of music and how music in a very physical sense affects us. And he has a deep understanding at the quantum level of what music does into the heart of a man. And I want to explore with him the effect of music in praise and worship and what it does to us viscerally, internally, and how it affects us. He's spoken on the subjects. I listened to him, and I want to dig deeper with him on the show. Zorro, another musician. I listened to Zorro at Morning Star, the Vision Conference they had at the end of last year in 2022, and he speaks about the power of words. And this is another subject very dear to my heart, and I want to impart it with you because I was affected by it in a positive way. Next person is Pastor Zach Witt. Pastor Zach Witt is the pastor of Multiply Church. He began to reveal his relationship with his father and a discussion of his father, who was the #1 cocaine dealer apparently in South Carolina. And it's a story of, I would say, a cathartic story, if I might use that word from the old Greek tragedies. It's cathartic in the sense that it went from a very, very bad place to a very, very good place in his life. And so I want to allow, or not allow, but engage, I would say is a better word, engage Zach Witt probably April of this year By the way, we're going to reschedule Jerry Boykin and schedule Pastor Witt. They've already agreed to come on the show. The other ones I'm speaking to haven't agreed yet. I'm just sharing with you my heart in terms of reaching out to them. I would like to get Joe Gibbs on the air. Joe Gibbs has a heart for children. He is particularly for young boys who are growing up to be men. And when he was coach of the Washington Redskins, he formed a charitable organization called Youth for Tomorrow in Manassas, Virginia. And I know Joe has a heart for them. I did have some chance many years ago to speak to him. It's hard for me to get through to him right now, wherever he is, Joe Gibbs Racing. I know he's lost 2 sons prematurely, and to the extent that he's willing to talk about that on the air, I'd love to have him express himself and express his voice. This is what the subject is. So these are the themes. I mentioned the other mention is fathers, family, freedom, children, and calling. That was the other one that was most important in the podcasts that I shared with people. So now I'm going to tell you a little personal story. I'm going to share with you something that happened with me just a couple of days ago, and it had to do with my granddaughters. And I'll show you a picture of my granddaughters. They're off to school. There's a 2-year-old, Cameron. She's the shorter one in the picture. And then it's Savannah. She's the taller one. Savannah's the big sister, and Cameron's the little sister. And my wife takes them in the morning to school, and occasionally when she can't make it, I'll take them. One of these days this week, I took my 2 granddaughters, and they're in the back seat. And their father had shared with me that they hang on every word that we say. And so I thought to myself, they're going to hang on every word I say. I got to make sure that the words I say are good words that they could take with them. Because how much time do I have to spend with them? This only takes a half an hour to take them to school. Not very much long time. So I want to give them things that they can think about, and will rest with them and put them in good stead and help them find their voice. So this past Tuesday, I was in the car, and they're in the back seat, and sometimes I play little songs for them, and they interrupt the songs, I stop the song. I said, Cameron and Savannah and Cameron, I said, your mommy and daddy is your family, and they're your father and mother. I said, but you're actually the children of God. And I said, you are the daughters of the Most High God. And I left that impression with them. I left those words with them intentionally because as their grandfather, I wanted them to understand who they were and the value that they had. And I hope they take that with them. Clint Eastwood used to say, make my day. Well, I hope I made their day. I hope I made their year. I hope I made their lifetime by letting them understand that they're the daughters of the Most High God. That is something I can impart with them in the Father as a grandfather from the Father's heart, and that's true. And they can take that to the bank, so to speak. So that's something that is really dear to my heart, and it really is disturbing to me when I see children who are, I know, most impressionable and most vulnerable being brought into public schools and actually being taught lies and being programmed against what the Word of God says. It just disturbs me to no end. And so I'm going to use everything that God has given to me as a storyteller, because I feel that's my role in life right now, is to be a storyteller and to relate stories that are encouraging, relate stories of how you can find your calling and destiny, relate stories how much God loves us, relate the true stories to not only children, grandchildren, but also to my audience, because this information that I'm providing on this radio show that becomes podcasts can be used in your life to share with your children and your grandchildren. I want to encourage you to find your voice, and I want you to encourage you to help others find their voice. What can be more satisfying as a father than to help his children and grandchildren find their voice, find out who they are, find their calling, find their destiny, All those things are so critically important to their life that I want to give you tools that you can use, words that you can speak, truth that you can impart that will get you there. You know, I've always remembered that Jesus himself was a storyteller. He always talked in parables, but he was always relating things to people. And it seemed to me he actually had three audiences. He had his disciples, who he always told the meaning of what the parables were. He had the people who were secondarily or in concentric circles, I guess, further removed from the close group of 12 that he had. And they could understand parts of it. And then he had his enemies, basically, the Pharisees. And they were always out to get him. And they were always trying to test him. And in the parables, there were truths hidden that they would never understand. Or sometimes if they would understand it, it would really aggravate them because they were so against him and against what he represented, the religious people. And it was all a reason because they saw him taking power away from them. And it was always at trying to trip him up. So I remember that story once that I told about the woman who was caught in adultery, and they wanted him trying to trip him up, trying to trip Jesus up. She was caught in adultery, caught in the very act, it actually says, which is actually creepy, as Steve Furtick once said. It's true, it's creepy that they caught him in the very act. How did they catch her in the act unless they were engaged with her somehow? But they were trying to get him to violate the law of Moses. And as he understood exactly what they were doing, he was very careful of what his speech was, and he didn't attack the law of Moses. He simply said, he was without sin, cast the first stone, and there he's writing into the dirt. And Scripture doesn't tell us what he was writing, but it must have been pretty powerful what he was writing, because from the oldest to the youngest, they left the scene. And there was nobody there left but the woman who was the adulteress with Jesus. And he says, where are your accusers? And they're not there. And he told her that he doesn't accuse her. He doesn't condemn her. That's out of the heart of God. He says, go and sin no more. Because he understood that what she was doing was only hurting her. And he wanted her to be free of the bondage of the sin that she found herself in. So it's important to help people to find their voice, if you can. And you may be even conscious of it. We, again, want to honor our sponsors, Carson Wealth Management. I posted that, by the way, on Facebook, and I had people comment that were thanking Carson Wealth Management for sponsoring us, which I thought that was nice to see. And if you're interested in sponsoring us, and actually we can create media for you in reels, R-E-E-L-S, little clips, and put those reels on your social media. So you can put it on your website and put it into other social media that you would desire to promote for your business, if that's the case. Now, we would like to encourage people. I really want feedback. I mention this on every show. I would like people to call this number, 704-872-6345. And that's the number of the radio station, because I love to say you want to speak to Papa Tom and leave a message with Papa Tom. And whatever you say there will be captured in a voicemail, and exactly in your own voice, it will be spoken to me. How do you like that? We're trying to share about capturing your voice. You can capture your voice on voicemail and share it with Papa Tom. There's that sort of a coincidence. So we'll be speaking to those gentlemen, there's I think 10 or 12 of them that I mentioned, in the next several weeks. And we're going to be giving air time to their voices and to encourage you on how to grow and find your own voice. So I appreciate you listening, and tune in every Thursday morning at 8 a.m. And share. If you don't get it, you can still find us at thefathersheartmedia.com and facebook.com/Papa Tom's Tales. We're all there for all the shows for you to help you and bless you in the Father's name.
You've been listening to The Father's Heart with Tom Clark. Join us again next Thursday morning at 8, right here on News Talk WSIC.